This is the IBJ podcast for the week of June 13th, 2022, brought to you by Taft. I'm your host, Mason King. Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. As we've discussed in previous episodes, the tech industry is a vital component of Indiana's economic development future. State officials and venture capitalists have put an immense amount of time and energy into supporting the state's tech industry, making sure conditions are right for young firms to grow, hire more employees, establish big bases of operation, enrich local investors, and eventually spin out more tech companies. 2021 was a banner year for the Indiana tech ecosystem. According to Indianapolis-based Elevate Ventures, venture capital investments in Indiana companies hit an all-time high of $1.4 billion in 2021, nearly triple the amount of investment seen the previous year. Two-thirds of that haul beefed up the business-to-business tech sector, which saw 88 deals worth a combined $923 million. And it's safe to say that some of the other deals in the life sciences, agricultural science, advanced manufacturing, and the business-to-consumer sector had significant technological elements as well. Now, 2022 seems to have tighter pockets. The flow of investment dollars has slowed so far this year. During the first quarter, Indiana tech companies attracted just $52.2 million in investment, down from $102 million during the first quarter of last year. We're also seeing a pullback nationally. U.S. venture investments hit $70.7 billion in the first quarter of this year, down from $95.4 billion in the previous quarter, and from $77 billion quarter from the first quarter of 2021. Technology reporter Susan Orr reports in the latest issue of IBJ that tech investors in Indiana are advising their companies to plan for a tighter spigot on capital and to make their current stashes last longer. On a national level, we're seeing hiring freezes and thousands of layoffs. For the latest edition of the IBJ podcast, I've invited Susan to fill us in on why venture capital is getting more scarce and what this means for Indiana's tech ecosystem. Here's our conversation. I would like to welcome back to the podcast Susan Orr, IBJ's technology reporter. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm good. Thanks for having me back. It's been a while.
Of course, I did just see you. It's not like we work on opposite sides of the country.
No, but we haven't seen each other in the podcast studio.
That's true. It's a new experience, yeah. And much better than it used to be. Well, let's get right to the story. And I thought it'd be good for folks that don't cover technology, folks who are not reporters, and for folks who are not in the technology industry, have a quick rundown of what venture capital is.
Yes, venture capital is a type of investment, and generally venture capital is investing in early stage companies, and they really like to focus on tech or tech-related companies. And the concept is if you're a venture investor, you're getting in on the ground floor or close to the ground floor on a company that you feel like has promise for the future. Of course, they're risky investments because not every company makes it, but if you win, you can win big.
And you mentioned that these are early stage companies, but there are also different strata of early stage companies. What are the different times that I could get in if I'm an investor looking to get a piece of something?
It really ranges the gamut. There's usually the way that funding is identified as by what stage it is, and so there's something called either pre-seed or seed funding. That's basically for a super new company that might not have even launched yet, but the pre-seed might be money to allow them to develop a product or to do market research. And then you get into the different series, and sometimes you'll hear Series A, Series B, Series C. Series A is basically the first main big funding once you get past the seed stage. So Series B would be, the second time a company raises a big amount of money. In general, the later the stage, the more money is involved. Although, you can see valuations or investments of different sizes, but generally, Series C is going to be for a company that's probably been around for at least a few years and is bigger, and so that would be why, it has, number one, the need for more money, and it has built up somewhat of a track record so that maybe investors are willing to invest more money.
So last year was a banner year for venture capital in Indiana, nationally, globally. Why do insiders expect investment capital, venture capital, to flow less freely this year than it did in 2021? Why are the spigots getting tighter?
There's a couple of different reasons. I mean, if you look at it just on a basic economics level, last year was so crazy. I mean, nothing can stay at that high pitch. At some point it was almost inevitable it was going to decline. People that I talked to said, well, just general macroeconomic factors that are affecting the economy in general are going to affect investments. A couple people mentioned, supply chain slowdowns and even the war in Ukraine, just anything that makes it maybe a little more uncertain or harder to do business is going to have an effect on the economy. And of course, venture capital is part of the economy.
Sure. One other thing that I had heard was that the IPO, the initial public offering market, had really slowed down. And my impression is that a lot of people, get into venture capital because they want to be there when that private company goes public, and that is the Valhalla of venture capital.
Right. That's how you can earn a big payout. That's one of the success strategies. Yeah, if that happens.
So, are we seeing evidence of this slowdown already, or is this primarily more a suspicion of people in the sector?
I would say it's a little bit of both. The numbers, the Indiana numbers actually do show this. TechPoint, which keeps track of the tech industry throughout the whole state of Indiana, they come out with quarterly reports to let people know, what the level of investment is. And of course, this is just publicly reported things, so it's not necessarily every investment, but just the ones that they know about. During the first quarter, they said there was a total of $52.2 million in investment in tech companies around the state, which sounds like a lot, but in first quarter a year ago, it was $102 million. The other way to look at that is there were many more investments this quarter than last quarter, so more smaller investments. And, TechPoint, I think, has argued that the fact that there's a lot of smaller investments, that bodes well because it means there's a lot of potential companies that are in that, just getting started stage, and a lot that could potentially grow and succeed. So, it kind of depends on how you look at it.
And this might be blindingly obvious to some people, but why should mom and pop care about what's happening in the venture capital world?
Tech is a significant area of emphasis for the state, and I think more so in the last year or so, with the IEDC putting a big emphasis on emerging industries, and tech is a big part of that. So I guess if you take the very big picture approach, Indiana sees tech as a promising engine of economic growth, and of course when you're a startup, this venture investment helps you succeed, and it helps you grow, and it helps you get to the point where maybe you have hundreds of employees and maybe you're an exact target and you get acquired by Salesforce, and that's sort of the ultimate success story. But if a company just starting out never gets the investment to grow to that level, that's why.
Yeah. And that's a great example, the exact target example, where they went from small private company to big public company, and the cash out for a lot of those investors became seed money for new companies. So we have a whole second and third tier of companies that came from that big bang.
Right. So, you have to take the long view. Maybe, today, tomorrow, it doesn't matter to the average person. But if you take it, look out over the next 5 or 10 years, if these small companies are finding it harder to attract investment today, that potentially makes it less likely that they're going to grow into what could be the exact target / Salesforce 10 years from now.
Yeah, and to be clear, companies in the Indianapolis area are still landing significant deals, some that we've reported on just very recently. I think last week, Indianapolis-based environmental technology firm NCAMP announced it had landed $30 million in Series C funding. It seems to me, just looking back maybe 3 or 4 years ago, a $30 million VC haul was huge. And in recent years, it has not been necessarily exceptional.
Right.
The financial technology firm Decimal LLC announced $9 million in seed funding. 2 weeks ago, Fishers-based marketing tech company Vibenomics announced $12.3 million investment. Now, do we look at these as exceptions to this new trend, or really has the trend not hit Indianapolis yet?
I would say the people that I talked to, and this was both investors and company leadership for some of these startups, a lot of them feel like, well, it hasn't maybe quite hit here yet in a big way, but the way these things usually go, as has been explained to me, is the big public companies maybe start cutting back. You think of Netflix announcing layoffs and disappointing earnings for a lot of these other companies, and then over time, that maybe in a quarter or two, that tends to trickle down to some of the smaller companies. So I don't think anybody's panicking yet or doing mass layoffs, but companies. Alice Ventures mentioned that's a local investment firm, that some of the companies that they fund have instituted hiring freezes. We got word that Terminus, which has a big office here, had some cuts, although the company wouldn't go into detail about what those were, but they said a small percentage. So, yeah, I think there is somewhat of a slowdown. I think the examples, the NCAMP and Decimal and Vibenomics, those are also good examples of what they offer customers might see as a very necessary thing. These are not like frill products. NCAMP helps customers comply with environmental regulations. And they point out if you don't comply with environmental regulations, you can be subject to some big fines. And so their customers, they don't have to use NCAMP to do it, but they have to do it. And so they're offering something, and NCAMP right now offers just a limited number of products only in the U.S., and so they see a big opportunity. Well, hey, we could pick up some customers in other countries, or we could get into, like, clean water is a big thing that they'd like to get into, and they have a fair amount of confidence that the customers that are using them for what they do offer now would stick with them and buy more products from them if they could offer this. So, and
so if you can make a case for the need for that product, and you have a good pitch, you still can raise money.
Right, yeah, and Vibenomics, I guess I would put in that same category. They're the ones you might remember a couple of years ago, they landed Kroger as a customer, and they have a platform where when you go into Kroger and you hear the music in the background, and then you might hear the in-store announcements or advertisements, Vibenomics offers the platform to make that possible. So what they're offering to customers is, hey, if you use the system, you could, customers might spend more in your stores. And so, strictly you don't have to have that in a store, but if you're promising that you'll earn more money by buying our product, then that's going to be appealing.
This is only apropos to me, but I have to say I love shopping, and it's almost always because of the music. It's like I don't go to clubs anymore. I go shopping, like Trader Joe's.
You're old.
Oh my God, I'm old, but I do love music. Okay, let's take a quick break to hear from our sponsor. This is the IBJ Podcast.
Taft, today's modern law firm. With more than 625 attorneys across 11 offices, we provide solutions to the business issues facing middle market and emerging companies alike. We do this through a highly collaborative and inclusive team approach. Taft, the modern law firm. To learn more, visit taftlaw.com.
All right, we're back with this week's edition of the IBJ Podcast, and my interview with Susan Orr about an anticipated slowdown in venture capital for tech companies. Yeah, one of the extraordinary things in your story, I think, is that two of the Indiana-based groups that provide venture capital to startups went on the record as saying they're counseling the startups that they work with to prepare for leaner times. And you mentioned Allos.
Right.
Remind me kind of where they sit in the ecosystem.
Allos pretty much funds early stage tech companies, not just in Indiana, but they are based in Indianapolis. And one specific that Allos partner David Kerr told me was that there's a concept in startup funding called runway. And basically what runway means is how long you think that the cash you've got on hand will last. So if a company has 12 months of runway, that's another way of saying they think that they've got enough money to last them about 12 months before they might need to go out and raise more money. So he's saying, if you were thinking that your runway was anywhere from 12 to 18 months, think about ways that maybe you could extend that to 18 to 24 months. The concept being, if we're in a little bit of a slowdown, you don't want to have to go out and raise money if you don't have to. And in fact, in camp, told me that they did not necessarily need to raise money right now, but the opportunity came up, and not all of their motivation, but part of it, they said, well, things might not be as easy as they are right now. We're going to take it. And they said now they feel like they've got about 3 years worth of runway, so they've got a nice cushion and avoids having to maybe go out and try to fundraise in a down market.
A lot of these companies are doing what anybody does, especially in these economic times. They're penny pitching. I mean, they're looking for ways
Sure.
To extend what they have.
Sure.
And we also spoke with the folks at Indianapolis-based High Alpha, which is a fairly extraordinary company. At least it feels like it does here in Indianapolis. I mean, it incubates, launches, and funds tech startups,
Right.
with a focus on business-to-business software as a service. And what message is it giving its companies?
Similar to what Alos conveyed, Christian Anderson, who's one of the partners at High Alpha, one of the people sort of at the top, he said he's telling companies basically to face reality, is how he put it, and just realize that funding might dry up a little bit and that you might need to make what you've got last a little bit longer. Christian is also just a very upbeat type person, and he was also talking about, this could be an opportunity to really take another look at the why of your company and really get refocused on what you're doing and why you're doing it, and potentially emerge stronger. Another thing Christian said that was interesting, he said that if you're a top performing, a really solid company, you are not going to have problems attracting money. He said the good companies are going to have to become great, and if you're not even good, then you're really in trouble. So sort of forcing people to level up their game, I guess. And I would say that these companies that we mentioned a minute ago that all have recently got funding, they're probably good examples of that. They've got a product that people perceive as probably necessary. They're growing. Some of these companies are already profitable, which is not insignificant. Sometimes it takes a company years to become profitable.
That's a great point now that I think about it, is that a lot of these companies aren't generating a profit yet. They are subsisting on this money they're getting from investors.
Right. Yeah. So it can be a survival play. If if you're not to the point where you're making a profit yet, where's that money going to come from?
You spoke with a Bloomington-based firm called Civic Champs, which I think just 2 months ago closed on $615,000
Right.
on seed funding. That's pretty early stage funding.
Right.
Now, they originally had expected that to last through the end of the year. What is it saying now about stretching out that investment?
Originally, I think they said that they figured that investment would get them through the end of this year, and now they're saying, well, we're sort of looking at what we can do to stretch that out potentially to 12 to 18 months, so potentially through the end of next year. Their CEO was talking about, and some of these plans are still fluid. I mean, they're still thinking about it, but they outsource certain of their functions. They outsource development talent to, not that they don't have in-house developers, but it's a very small company, fewer than a dozen people. So if they hire outside developers, that means they can excel. They can develop products faster and launch products faster, marketing, that sort of thing. And so one way that they are considering potentially cutting costs is not using that outsourced freelance talent, basically, and just bringing it in-house, because they can, other than the legal work, he said they could do most of it in-house. It just means that they wouldn't be able to move as fast, because basically they'd have fewer people working on the same thing. So
you spoke with two firms that recently had 9-figure VC raises, Indianapolis-based FormStack and Indianapolis-based Greenlight Guru. FormStack had raised $425 million last fall. Greenlight Guru raised $120 million in June 2021. Are they taking evasive action against the slowdown in VC, or do they have what they need for the foreseeable future?
Well, the Greenlight Guru said, everybody realizes the market's slowed down. We're optimistic, but we're evaluating things, and if we need to change, we will. It's notable that the company has had a handful of acquisitions just since January that they've announced. So they're definitely they're not in too defensive of a posture if they're still acquiring. That company, their technology helps medical device developers develop their product and make sure that it's compliant with FDA and other regulations. So you could put that in a category of something that its customers see. Hey, this can help us launch to market faster. It helps them potentially save money. FormStack, kind of the same thing. They're still hiring. FormStack technology allows customers to move what used to be maybe a paper form to an online form and potentially save a lot of staff time and streamline things. So that's another potential example of they're offering something that if customers continue to see value in it during a downturn, especially if those customers themselves might be reducing their headcount, that bodes well. FormStack also made the point that for 11 out of the 12 years it's been in existence, it's run a profitable company. So it knows it can do it. It's done it, for most of its life. And I think that gives that company a lot of comfort that they can get through this next period.
Is there a silver lining to any of this? I was just thinking about what you said about forcing companies, for example, to really up their game. I guess you could also say that this also is sort of a natural evolutionary weed-out moment for some companies.
Right.
But is there another way for the most optimistic of us to look at the slowdown in venture capital?
Well, at least within the industry, I would say yes. More than one person said, the hiring market has just been so crazy tight the last few years that if companies are slowing down their hiring plans or if they're even laying off people, those companies that are in a position to still hire feel like, well, we can probably pick up some really good people that we would not have been able to land. So from a hiring shortage standpoint, if you're a employer that's in market to hire skilled tech people, then that is a bright spot.
Every third episode of the IBJ podcast comes down to talent. I mean, this is the issue of the decade, is being able to find the talent to staff, these new companies that aren't interested in becoming big companies.
Right.
And here we go. This is another example.
Yeah, and I think with tech too, it might be even more of an issue because a fair number of companies are remote only, which means they don't have an office. And a lot of companies, a question that I've started asking is, okay, you're based in Indianapolis. How many of your employees live in this area? Because they don't necessarily, and sometimes only a few do. So there's a plus and a minus to that, is that these companies, these local companies can and have hired talent from all over the country, including places like Austin, Texas, which is a big tech hotspot. The downside is that people that live here or anywhere can also get jobs anywhere. So you've got a bigger pool of competition and a bigger potential pool of people you could hire. So it kind of works both ways.
Well, this is great. Well, not great, but this is for a news story, a great news story, and that we can follow up on this here and probably let's look at it another 6 months and see what the VC market has done.
That's right.
As we head into the fourth quarter.
That's right. Yeah, and TechPoint, like I said, TechPoint every quarter they come out with a roundup of they look at both investment and they look at mergers and acquisitions, and that's a really good way to at least periodically sort of check in and see, okay, how are things doing. And numbers are always good because you can look at the numbers and then you can look at, well, why are the numbers the way they are, and that was sort of how this story evolved.
All right, it's a date, but I'm sure I'll see you before then.
Oh, well, I hope so.
All right, thanks so much for your reporting. It's a great story.
Thanks, Mason.
My thanks again to Susan Orr. And as I mentioned, you can read Susan's story in the latest issue of IBJ. And folks, before you get on with the rest of your week, there are a few other stories in the latest issue of IBJ I want to bring to your attention. First up, the city of Indianapolis is considering selling carbon credits to invest in carbon-reducing forestry projects, and it might be able to turn some sizable local companies into customers. Leslie Bonilla Muniz writes that corporate interest in carbon neutrality is opening opportunities for city programs. Also in this week's issue, Daniel Bradley explains how the not-for-profit Agape Therapeutic Writing Resources helps people with disabilities and mental health challenges by providing opportunities to bond with animals. And Mickey Shuey reports that the Indianapolis Airport Authority has updated its incentives plan to free up more fuel, $5 million in fuel, to chase nonstop flights, especially to international destinations. Again, we can find these stories in the latest print edition of IBJ or online at ibj.com. I will say it's quite a bit easier to access all of the latest local news about business and politics and all of IBJ's data on Central Indiana's business community and economy if you're a subscriber. And here's a new development. We have wrapped all of IBJ's content together with all of the stories, columns, and podcasts from our sister publication, Inside Indiana Business, and now works out to about $3 per week for actionable information about every notable business development across the state. You won't find Indiana's story told with this kind of breadth and depth anywhere else. Just go to ibj.com and click on the subscribe button. Thanks again for making time this week for the IBJ podcast. I'm Mason King. The editor of our podcast is Leslie Weidenbender. Hang in there, everybody. We'll be back again next week.